Okay, so we're currently working on the worst and best movies of the year, and I completely forgot that Secret Level came out, and so I am currently working on those two other videos, but I wanted to get this out because it's kind of a special thing for me. I've really been looking forward to it, and I completely forgot that it was coming out on the 10th. So, yeah, I wanted to just get into a couple of things I thought about the first volume of this show. I won't spoil anything serious for you guys, and this is my general review of Secret Level Part 1.
That's impossible. Doesn't matter what I made you for. This is what you were meant for. Conquest awaits.
So this was announced way back in, I would say, August with Gamescom, and it was kind of like the only thing I really liked about Gamescom. Very disappointing in some of the things they announced, but for the most part, this one kind of surprised me. It was kind of created by Tim Miller, the guy who did Love, Death, and Robots and Deadpool, and like, Love, Death, and Robots was kind of like the heavy metal fix I desperately needed. And when he announced this, it's like, okay, what if we did that but with video games? And so basically what Secret Level is, it's a anthology of, like, short films, each one pertaining to a specific video game franchise. So you have Warhammer, Sifu, Dungeons and Dragons, you have Pac-Man, you have Crossfire X, you have Unreal Tournament, and they haven't released them yet, but they're going to at some point do God of War, Mega Man, among a few others. So, like, I was very excited about this show. I was really excited to try it out, and I tried out episode 1. I believe it was called The Queen's Cradle, which is the episode connected to Dungeons and Dragons. And watching this episode, I did not like it. I mean, it was visually stunning, don't get me wrong, but I just was not enjoying this episode at all. And it had the same issue that the Chris Pine Dungeons & Dragons movie had, where it just does not set up anything for you. It just expects you to know what everything is and to just keep up. Otherwise, you're being left behind. And I did not enjoy this episode at all. I didn't really connect with any of the characters, and like the little, like, I don't know what you call it, the dwarf mage character, their head was like 5 times too big for their body. It was basically nightmare fuel, and I was not digging this episode at all. It doesn't set anything up. It's just like, keep up, like, you know, like, you better know all this beforehand. And I have no idea if this is in reference to Baldur's Gate 3. I don't know if this is in reference to something else that's already been established, but I didn't know who the bad guys were. I didn't know who any of these characters were, if they were already established or not. And honestly, I didn't care about any aspect of episode 1, which was not a good starting point for this show. I mean, episode 1 was probably the weakest one out of the 8 that were released this week. And that is one thing I would like to just briefly touch on. I really appreciate that they released like half the show this week, and then next week they're going to release the other half. If they were doing an episode by the week, like just one episode every week, I probably would have checked out before the next week. If that was their first episode, and it was specifically that, it wasn't any longer, I probably would not have given this series any more of a chance. So the fact that they actually released 8 of the episodes at once is a good thing, because I probably would not have kept going with it. So I continued on with the second episode, which, interesting enough, I've actually played Sifu. The second episode is a level focused, or a episode focused on the video game Sifu. I've actually played it, I've actually completed it. I'm just trying to figure out the right time to release or do the videos on that game for the channel. But it's actually one of the few games in the series I have played. And going into it, it was a tad confusing for someone who's played the game. Like, it's definitely set during the nightclub level, but I don't remember the boss being the boss for the nightclub level. I think they were just taking some liberties with the game. They took probably like one of the most visually stunning levels, added in their own original boss for the story, and that was it. And like, that was the most confusing part for me, because it's like, okay, how is this going to tie into the game? And it's like, it kind of feels like it doesn't tie into the game. It feels like someone wasn't trying to make something connected with the game. They were just making their own story of Sifu, and it looks a lot like the game, and they made their own character. And it's like, that was kind of the most confusing part, because visually the episode was stunning and the fight choreography was fantastic. I absolutely loved most of this episode. Just the story kind of threw me off, because it's like, I don't remember the boss for the nightclub being like this. And so that's what was kind of throwing me. But then there was episode 3, and called The Once and Future King, and this one was based around the game New World. Now, interesting enough, I have not played a single second of New World. I have not seen many of the trailers. I don't even really know what the game is about. I just know it's an online only multiplayer game. And going into the story, I didn't feel like I needed to. Like, this story, unlike the first episode, did a good job of setting up the story, the characters, and having a payoff for people who didn't even play New World or know anything about New World. This is what I wished the Dungeons & Dragons episode did. This is what I wish the Dungeons & Dragons movie did, is have a good setup and payoff, and just complete night and day difference. Dungeons & Dragons episode 1, it's like, if you don't know like the lore to Dungeons & Dragons, then you're not going to be able to follow this at all. You need to be like a level 33 dungeon master to be able to follow all this shit. And with New World, it's like, hey, we got this fun story. You don't have to have played New World to be able to follow it. And it's like, Dungeons & Dragons, take a freaking lesson. Okay, because like, I loved episode 3 of Secret Level. Arnold Schwarzenegger voices the main character, and it was so much fun, getting to hear him. He doesn't sound like an old man in this episode, which is great, and so it's like, I kind of wish or hope that Arnold Schwarzenegger does like a ton of voiceover work now, because 1, he doesn't have to do anything physical, and 2, he could still have fun with each role. And definitely, I got the impression he was having fun with this. A couple of callbacks to Conan the Barbarian, especially with like the sword he was carrying, which was awesome. And like, this episode has a really nice payoff at the end. I felt like, that was a really good story. And it was with episode 3 that I started to really get into this series. Episode 1 was just a complete mess. Episode 2 should have been better in terms of just not confusing the audience. And then episode 3 was kind of when the ball started get going. And like, episode 2, I could see how if you've never played Sifu before, you would have no idea what's going on. So I got a little concerned after watching the first 2 episodes. It's like, wait a minute, are the only people who are going to be able to enjoy these episodes people who have actually played the game correlate with those episodes. And thankfully that's not the case. Just with some of the episodes, that's the case. Episode 4 was with Unreal Tournament, which I was a little intrigued by, because Unreal Tournament is a game franchise that's been dead for a long time, and it never had like a story. It just had like a general setup of like, oh, there's a battle royale deathmatch and multiple different creatures from across the universe, go. And like, that's the general synopsis of Unreal Tournament. They never needed a story, and episode 4 focuses on one of the characters. I don't know if this character ever showed up in one of the Unreal Tournament games, but if it didn't, they introduced this new character called San. And this was a really good episode. I would also say it's one of the longest episodes, and it was just... it's one of the few times they actually make me root for the self-aware AI robot over humans, which normally I don't, because I tend to be a little bit partial to my own species, but this was one of the few times where it's like I actually was rooting and caring for the AI self-aware robot, and I think that's a huge win in terms of the show. The animation was beautiful in this. I loved the robot character, how he was evolving over time, and I liked how he even was kind of like playing to the crowd just naturally without even like being told he had to. And so no, it was a fantastic episode, and I was not expecting a lot out of the Unreal Tournament episode, but it ended up being like one of my favorite episodes of the series. And then we got to episode 5, and this was the big one, because this is the one that kind of like everyone was waiting for, and that was the Warhammer 40,000 episode. It was titled "And They Show No Fear." Again, harking back on episode 1, this is how you do an introduction to newcomers into your universe. Warhammer 40,000 is another like franchise I am not a fan of. I don't know a lot about. I do not follow. The only reason why I'm kind of intrigued by it is because Henry Cavill is working on a live action project in the universe, and he is passionate about the franchise, which tells me it's going to be a like labor of love. So many of these adaptations lately, you find out that the person making it's like, oh, I didn't really ever play the original one, and I'm just doing my own thing to make this my thing. Halo. And it's like, people can't figure out why these adaptations suck. And it's like, maybe because you don't have a fan working on it. And Henry Cavill is a passionate fan of Warhammer 40,000. And so when I heard he was working on it, it's like, yeah, I want to try it, because if anyone's going to make a good project, it's going to be a fan. And watching this Amazon-produced episode of Secret Level, I'm kind of hopeful for what Amazon and Henry Cavill are going to do, because this does an excellent job telling me what a space marine is. It does an excellent job setting up the universe in as simple of a way as possible without getting too convoluted, and it did everything that the Dungeons and Dragons episode didn't do. And I, just with a little bit of like an intro like voiceover and an opening scroll, I was set. I was able to like be able to enjoy this franchise so much better than the terribly introduced Dungeons and Dragons episode. Like, seriously, what a terrible episode to start off your series with. I mean, I felt like walking out after that episode was over, because I didn't know who any of these characters were, I didn't care what they were doing, and I didn't want to know what happened next. But with the Warhammer 40,000 episode, it's like, okay, so what's a Space Marine? And they show you what a Space Marine is. And it's like, holy shit! I really want to see what they do with a live action Warhammer now, because man, were they badass in this episode. And it's just like, yeah, I am so excited. If this is just a tease of what to expect from the live action Warhammer project, I am so in. I am so excited and ready to go because this was awesome. And it was amazing to see how badass and unstoppable a Space Marine was. And then to see something that could like just walk over them, it's just like, whoa. And so this did an amazing job introducing a normie into Warhammer, let alone getting them excited for whatever happens next with Warhammer. And I kind of want to play the Space Marine 2 now even more. I don't know why I called it the Space Marine 2, just Warhammer Space Marine 2. I feel like playing it more now after watching this. So good job on whoever made that episode. And then episode 6, holy hell, that was weird. It's like, hey, we're going to do an episode on Pac-Man. It's like, okay, that should be like a fun, cutesy episode. It's like, and we're going to have the people who made Scorn do it. It's like, wait, what? And like, if you don't know what Scorn is, I did a review on it. Visually stunning game. Some of the most ridiculously over difficult puzzles ever conceived by a person. Like, I stopped playing the game because the puzzles were just so ridiculously like, just, oh yeah, here's a room, figure out how to get out of it. And it's like, oh yeah, apparently there was like a Rubik's Cube you were supposed to figure out. It's like, nothing told me to do that. Well, too bad. And so like, I never finished Scorn, but it was this like very dark, gothic, Geiger-esque world, and someone decided to like take the game of Pac-Man. It's like, what if we had Pac-Man, but it was in this dark, gothic, Geiger-esque world, and it's just so weird. And unlike the other episodes in this show, this one really goes off the deep end in doing an alternate take on the source material. Whereas Dungeons & Dragons, it feels like Baldur's Gate 3. Sifu, it felt like Sifu. Unreal Tournament, you could see the games in Unreal Tournament in that episode. But with this Pac-Man episode, it was just like, yeah, someone is on some serious mind-altering drugs when they were writing this. And like, I'm so glad I don't take drugs, because not only would this episode have really like freaked me out if I was high watching it, but like the ending to the episode just decides to do this like complete mind screw. Like, what if you were this all along? And it's just like my brain started melting, and I was sober when I was watching it, so I can't imagine what someone on weed would react to if they were watching this episode. And then episode 7, interesting enough, dealt with Crossfire. I played Crossfire X, and it's no longer around because it's one of those games where it was online only for reasons, and it was shut off, and now no one can play it. And it's one of the reasons why I refuse to get any game that's online only anymore. And so, but there is another Crossfire game called Sierra Squad, which is a lot of fun, and you can play that offline. And this episode was pretty entertaining, actually. I had a lot of fun with it. And all in all, it was a very visually stunning episode. They did some really good work on the visual effects of it, and it was a good contained story. Basically, two factions fight over a package, and has kind of an interesting, like, I don't want to call it a message, but interesting, like, philosophical question at the end, which I thought was good. And again, because I love ragging on the first episode, this does what episode 1 failed to do. Good introduction, good payoff, and it doesn't expect you just to keep up. And then the last episode was probably my second least favorite, and that was the Armor Corps Asset Management episode with Keanu Reeves. And the reason why I didn't like this episode was they have a good setup. They have the show go on at quick pace, and just when it starts doing something interesting, the show's over. And I don't think they're doing another episode with this continuing on a story. And so it's just like, you end it there. You end it there right when you start doing something like interesting, and it's like, seriously, either you should have had this like another 5 or 10 minutes longer, or you shouldn't have ended it there, because I just kind of felt like the payoff wasn't worth it. It's interesting, don't get me wrong, like the thing they like tease at the end of this episode's interesting, but unless they do a second season and they decide to do a continuation of that, which I think is very unlikely that they do a continuation of the story, I feel like it was a gem. I mean, it was fun watching mechs fight, but the thing at the end is just like, you're leaving me on that. Okay. So, all in all, the first half of this show, I've really enjoyed. There's a couple of weak episodes, a couple of episodes I did not like. The worst episode is episode 1. I would highly recommend you give it to episode 3. Each episode's about like 15 minutes, so it's not like you have to give that much time. If you want to even jump episode 1 to 2 and 3, you wouldn't be missing anything, because unless you're a massive Dungeons and Dragons aficionado, like, you know all the lore, you know every like faction like the back of your hand, you're not going to enjoy this episode, because it just throws you in the deep end and it doesn't give you any hand-holding whatsoever, and it just expects you to be able to follow basically just, yeah, you should be a Dungeons and Dragons aficionado to be able to enjoy this. And look, there might be some Dungeons and Dragons fans that absolutely love episode 1, but as a casual consumer, I didn't like it. I also wasn't nuts about episode 8 with Armor Core. Episode 6, Pac-Man, I don't know if it was I didn't like it. It was just, it made me very uncomfortable. And then episode 2, I was expecting a little bit less confusion with the story of Sifu. I loved it visually. It was a visually stunning episode. And definitely, if you love the Feo game Sifu, then you should really enjoy this. But one of my concerns was that if I had played all of this stuff, I wouldn't have been able to really enjoy it, and with some of the cases, that was true, but there was quite a few things, like episode 3 and episode 5, I never really have played New World or Warhammer, and I still was able to really enjoy those two stories that they did. And so, if you're kind of interested in some of these franchises, see, like, this, I guess you could say is like a demo reel for some of these franchises. Like, let's say you've never played any of these and you watch all these and you may go, you know, I think I might want to try Armor Core, that seems like a lot of fun. Or, you know, I think I might want to try, you know, New World because I like the art style to that. Then this show probably will be for you. It might be a good, like, demo introducing you to new franchises. The only one that I don't think will work is Pac-Man, because they just go so far extreme into an alternate take of Pac-Man that even if you like that episode and you go try playing Pac-Man, it's going to feel drastically different. I mean, if you watch something like Pac-Man, I would say go try Scorn. Just understand they are ridiculously overpowered puzzles that is not going to give you any hint on how to solve. But if you like that visual style, then you'll love the world of Scorn. And so I had a lot of fun with this, even though it didn't always hit for me. I definitely want to check out part 2 and I think it's 7 episodes that are going to release next Tuesday. But yeah, this was great. I had a lot of fun with this, and I would love to see a second season following different games, dead games, like some of the old Sony IPs that Sony refuses to bring back. It'd be great to see some of them return with, you know, a second season of Secret Level. And so, Amazon, this was a win. I absolutely enjoyed this, and I highly recommend, if you like animated shorts with really good visual effects and CGI, then definitely check out Secret Level. It was a lot of fun, and even if you don't like every episode, you're going to find an episode that you're going to like in this. So, anyway, that's been my review of Secret Level Part 1. My name's Chris Recall with 11 Hour Reviews, and that will be all for today.